Hey everyone, welcome back. In the previous lesson, we worked on our vehicles view controller UI, and it's looking good, but now all we need to do is actually kind of go through the same process that we did for the home world, where we create a model. Then we are going to create a vehicles API, and then we're going to update the UI. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to create a new file here under model. I'm going to say new file. It's going to be a Swift file. I'm going to say next, and we are going to call this vehicle and say create. Now then, let's go ahead and take a look at what we have available to us for a vehicle. Let's take a look here at Luke Skywalker. He has vehicles 14. So I'm going to write here vehicles/14 and say request. All right, and we have all of these properties for a vehicle. This is going to be the JSON that is returned as part of the person. So I'm going to go back to people real quick. And we see here that Luke Skywalker has an array of vehicles, okay? And he has multiple vehicles. He has vehicles/14 and vehicles/30. Some people are going to have more vehicles, some people less. Some people aren't going to have any vehicles. Same thing with the starships, okay? That's why we had to do that check with our segue buttons to make sure that we did a check to see if the person has any vehicles and starships, all right? So going back to vehicles/14, again, we see here all of these properties. And again, you are free to go through and pick out as many of these as you want to include in your app. But according to our, let's see here, according to our storyboard and the work that we did in the last lesson, we are going to go with the name, model, manufacturer, cost, length, speed, crew, and passengers, okay? So we can go to our vehicle.swift model here, and we can say struct, and this is going to be vehicle, and we are going to start out conforming to codable. And then we're going to provide the properties that we are going to use for our vehicle. So I'm going to say let name of type string, let model of type string, let manufacturer of type string. Whoops, fix that. There we go. Let cost of type string, let length of type string, let speed of type string, let crew of type string, and let passengers of type string. All right, great. But now let's check out the JSON here. And we'll see that name, model, manufacturer, those all work out, but cost in credits is different. The JSON key is different. The speed, which we're looking at here, the max atmospheric speed, is a little bit different. And I think everything else is okay. But we are going to need to add in our enumerator for coding keys because some of these are slightly different from what we have in our JSON, okay? So I'm going to say enum, and this is coding keys, type string, and coding key, okay? And we need to add in all of these, and for the ones that are different, supply the correct string that it should look for. So we have case name, case model, case manufacturer, case cost, and this is the one that was different. Okay, so this was snake case cost underscore in underscore credits. Okay, then length was the same, and speed was different. So speed is equal to max underscore atmospheric speed. And if you want to make real sure that you got that one right, go ahead and copy that directly from Swappy and paste it right there. That could be a tricky one. And then we have case crew and case passengers. All right, so we got the two that are different here in our coding keys. So now this should work out perfectly. All right, now the next step is to do like we did with our home world API.swift file and create the class that is going to handle our network request for us. So I'm going to click on services, right click and say new file. And we're going to create a Swift file, and I'm going to call this vehicle API and say create. Then I'm going to say class vehicle API. This is going to be almost identical to the home world API.swift. So I'm actually just going to copy this function here and paste it in our vehicle API. Okay, so what is different? Well, first off, let's give it a different name. So I'm going to say get vehicle. And our completion is going to be a little bit different because if we go and right click on home world response completion, jump to definition, we'll see that it is returning a home world and we need a vehicle. So I'm going to create a new type alias and the type name is going to be vehicle response completion. And the type expression is an input of a vehicle and it is going to return void. There we go. And let's see here, something's not quite working here. It says that vehicle is not recognized. So let's come back up to vehicle. I messed up the struct name. That should be just vehicle there. Save that, come back to our vehicle API or I should say constants. And let's see if that's back to working. I'm going to do a build. And okay, so that's working. Now we got to come back to our vehicle API and we need to import Alamo Fire, of course. That looks good. And we need to change our type alias here. So this is instead of home world completion, this is a vehicle response completion. And then the only other thing that we need to change here is by changing the home world. Instead of a home world, we are going to be converting and decoding to a vehicle type, and we are going to do a completion of a vehicle. So let vehicle and completion vehicle. All right, and do a build to make sure that error goes away. And it does. And there we go. We just finished our vehicle API. All right, so just to run through this one more time, we are creating a function called getVehicle. We are going to be passing in a URL string for that particular vehicle. We have our completion handler here. We have our URL. We perform the Alamo Fire request with a response JSON handler. If we have an error, then we are going to get out of this function. If we have the data, then we are going to decode it into a type of vehicle, and then we can finish the function and return this vehicle to wherever this function has been called, where it can be used. In our case, that is going to be here in the vehicles vc.swift file. So let's go ahead and create our API instance. I'm going to say let API equal vehicle API and initialize that. And then let's see here. And then let's create a function to get the vehicle. Okay, so I'm going to say func get vehicle. And what this is going to do is this is going to call the API function that we just created, but we're going to do it here because we are actually going to be calling this potentially multiple times because some people have multiple vehicles. So we are going to pass into this function the URL. So I'm going to say URL string, and we're going to then call API.getVehicle. We're going to pass in the URL and then tab over to completion and press enter and then name that vehicle in code. All right. So here we are going to say, we're going to make sure that we have a vehicle because remember, this is optional. So I'm going to say if let vehicle is equal to vehicle, then we are going to say self.setup view, but we don't have that yet either. So we're going to create a new function here, func setup view. And given a vehicle of type vehicle, we are going to use this function to do the view setup where we set up all of our values for our labels that we have up here, okay? So we are going to say name label.text is equal to vehicle.name. Then we have model label.text is equal to vehicle.model. Then we have manufacturer, or I think I just named that maker label. Yep, maker label dot text is equal to vehicle dot manufacturer. Then we have cost label dot text is equal to vehicle dot cost. Then we have length label dot text is equal to vehicle dot length. Then we have speed label dot text is equal to vehicle dot speed. Scroll down a little bit. And then we have crew label dot text is equal to vehicle dot crew. And finally, passengers. Let's see here. What did I name that? PX label, passenger label dot text is equal to vehicle dot passengers. All right, so we have our function that is going to set up the view. Now let's call it from right here. I'm going to say set up view and pass in our vehicle. Very good. Oh, and we need to call to self. All right, great. So now up here in view.load, we should be able to call getVehicle, which goes and fetches our vehicle object from the SWAPI API. Then we can pass that to setUpView, which will set up the view. So here in view.load, we should be able to call getVehicle. But first, we need to make sure that we are getting the correct URL, because again, remember that we could have one or multiple URLs in our vehicles array that is part of person. In fact, we're going to be needing to access the vehicles from multiple parts of this view controller class. So I'm going to create a vehicles array right here so that it's available to the entire class. I'm going to initialize it as an empty array. And then here in view.load, I'm going to set that equal to the person.vehicle URLs. And then we're going to get the first URL in the array, if there is one, which there will be because we did a check to make sure that there is at least one URL in our vehicles array. And we're going to do that by saying guard let first vehicle equal vehicles dot first, and this returns an optional, which is why we are doing the guard let. And if there isn't one, if somehow we got to this view controller and there isn't one, then we're just going to return. And then once we have that first URL, the first vehicle, we can call getVehicle and pass in first vehicle. And that should actually do it. So let's do a run through real quick. We aren't going to be working with the previous and next buttons quite yet, but let's just make sure that we can generate a random person, segue to our vehicles view controller, that we can call our API.getVehicle function, which will go and hit the API and get the vehicle information for that specific URL, which in our first case is just going to be the first URL, and then update our UI. So let's go ahead and test that out. All right, here we are. Let's press random. And we got to find someone that has some vehicles. All right, so I'm going to click on the vehicles and we should have an array of URLs. It could be just one, but however many there are, it's going to grab the first one, hit our API, and get back the information, which it did. Look at that. Cool, very cool. We got the name, model, manufacturer. You might want to put some auto shrink on these labels to make sure that you can see them a little bit better. But yeah, that looks awesome. Way to go. All right, so in the next lesson, what we're going to do is work with these previous and next buttons so that if there are multiple URLs, then these will work accordingly. All right, so I will see you then.